Well, welcome back, Fairfax community. It's been nearly 6 months since we had our last extraordinary guest, a hiatus through different circumstances, but we are back today with someone from sunny Wales. As cold as it is in Melbourne here today, it's apparently going to be 26 there. Um, we're with, we're not talking to an advanced instructor from Oxygen Advantage. We're talking to a master instructor and someone with an extensive background in professional sports, which continues to go. David Jacko Jackson, thank you for joining the Fairfax today.
Mate, pleasure to be here. I was actually in Australia teaching in New Zealand end of last year, which
With
I guess is a long time ago now, but yeah, it
that was
doesn't
with
feel like
was it
that
with
long
Dan
ago.
Gladstone?
Yeah, we did one with Dino in Sydney, and then with Nigel Beach in New Zealand.
David, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Nottingham. I grew up in Nottingham, in just like smack bang in the middle of England, and yeah, started my rugby career at the age of 6 and played there all the way. The joke is that I played for every team at Nottingham apart from the ladies because I went from like your under sevens and eights all the way through. I was actually yeah started at 6 years old, finished when I was 31. So I've still got the trophy that's dated 1988 for best effort, which meant that when I was 6, I was rubbish, but I tried hard.
The Encouragement Award, I think we call it here.
Yeah.
Well, that can't be the case throughout because you ended up playing over 300 games, over 100 tries with Nottingham. Were there any other sports that interested you when you were younger, or was it always going to be rugby union?
Oh, yeah. I mean, like we didn't play rugby at school. My dad is from North Wales. He's a big rugby man. He played like Welsh schoolboys. Um, yeah, there was no none of my friends played rugby. There was no rugby at school. But my dad loved rugby. Took me to down to Nottingham. It was like the biggest club around us back then. Yeah, it was like littered with England internationals like Rob Andrew, Brian Moore, people like this. And so yeah, I remember I love just running around and getting muddy. That's one of the things I love doing. But other sports, football is the big one, and I actually gave up rugby when I was about I don't know, I can't remember, maybe about 13 or something like that. Um, because I was doing well at football, got selected for like a representative team that played on a Sunday, and that's when rugby was, and I had to make a decision, and I chose football. And a year later, I came back to rugby because football wasn't all that it was cracked up to be, and it turned out my skill in football was just being fast. And when you're really fast and play up front, when you're little and you're playing big goals, it's dead easy to score. But once everyone else started to catch up, and I needed some actual skill, it turned out that I wasn't actually wasn't actually that good. So it's actually quite fortunate that I was in a bit of a um, on a bit of a downer actually at that point, and just by chance, the old coach, well, not even the old coach, one of the parents rang my dad up um, to ask him, even though we'd not been there for a year. They said, "Oh, our coach has left. We're looking to get in. We're trying to get someone new in. We're not asking you to do it, but just for the next few weeks, could you like just run a few sessions for the lads? Because my dad had done coaching, and I was like, yeah, on a bit of a downer from football and everything. And my dad was like, "Well, I'm gonna go. Like, do you want to come with me?" And I was like, "Okay." Like, went along, and then yeah, just fell back in love with it.
When did you when did you know that you were going to become professional?
Um, I had an interesting relationship with rugby, to be fair, when I was younger. At like at under 18s, I had like England trials, and I had my first. I was playing a year young, so I was like rather than being 17, I was 16. Um, and I remember at that point, I didn't really. Everyone else seemed to want to like be professional, and I just remember thinking like I didn't. I enjoyed it, but it was almost like a bit. I don't know if I want to just do this. I remember having that feeling of, yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of the, if I think to across everything where it's like school or whether it's like rugby, or anything, the people that are like the coaches or the teachers or the people that are in charge, people will know this at like work. It's like you got a good boss at work compared to or good colleagues at work. Like, yes, what you're doing for work makes a big difference to your sort of happiness and fulfillment, but actually the people around you make a huge difference. And I think that I was probably, school is a classic one. The subjects that I had really fantastic teachers in, guess what? I liked those subjects and did well at those subjects. The subjects that maybe weren't wasn't naturally good at, but equally if the teacher wasn't very good, sorry to say, then you didn't really do well. You didn't really enjoy it. So I was very lucky at times to have like fantastic coaches in my rugby career. And that's when I would have played my best rugby and enjoyed it the most. But there were also times when you didn't have the best coaches and you didn't really enjoy it. And I remember at one point when I was, about 16, 17, being like, don't know if I really want to do this. And actually I went to uni, I did my degree. It was when I had a taste. It's when I had a taste of real life of working all that. I'd done a teacher training degree after my engineering degree, and so I had like 1 year like in a school where we were like I was in school like all day, and then would go to rugby at night and like train. I literally trained like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I wouldn't train Friday night, and then we'd play Saturday, and that was a busy year. Um, I ended up doing well. I was top try scorer in the league, and then got offered a full time contract after that year. And at that point, I was definitely like, I'm going to give this a shot full time because trying to do it as well as a job is just freaking brutal.
Um, w- can you make a reasonable living as a professional rugby union player?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, union over. I mean, back then, like I was playing the championship, which is the league below the top league. And
Right.
back then, um, yeah, your I don't know, your average wage of a rugby player back then would have been similar to just the average wage for across the country. Um, these days in the Premiership, there's people earning, it's nothing like footballers, but there'll be plenty of players on like in and around 100 grand a year type of thing, and your top internationals will be on, more than that. So it's yeah, you're earning a normal sort of or good wage as opposed to like setting yourself up for like every the interest like with rugby, like you're gonna have to have a career after your rugby career unless you're the top 1%. But even though look at everyone, everyone's still doing something. Even your Johnny Wilkinsons are doing punditry. He's got his own business. Like everyone's still carrying on with some sort of career afterwards. It's not kickback.
I know it comes down to popularity and how much money an industry can get, but that's pretty hard work, isn't it? Being a professional rugby union player, but also having to hold down a day job as well.
But yeah, hence hence why when I got the chance to, I was teaching science in a secondary school,
Yeah.
trying to teach science to kids that don't want to learn science. That's a freaking hard gig as well.
Um, Pre 2013, did you have many injuries?
Yeah, I got first knocked out and taken to hospital in my second England trial, like when I was 17. Um, that was quite a bad concussion, but just as most people, even if it's a bad one, with the first time you've had it, with no previous injuries or no previous head traumas, you know, following like a return to play protocol is normally goes reasonably smoothly. I can't remember I can't remember what the protocols were back then, but I'd have felt fine within a day or so, and then you know, didn't do any contact for a few weeks or whatever the thing was, and then was back to back to playing comfortably. But yeah, through my career, I got a number of head injuries, some that went unnoticed. One big one where I fractured my eye socket in three places, or my jaw and eye
What was the
socket.
mechanism for that? Was that being punched, or that was a bump, or what happened there?
No, a bad decision from me and someone absolutely melting me.
Really?
So his head, I mean, it wasn't on like it wasn't malicious, but his head like hit me, um, and so even on my medical records to this day, despite that being clearly a head trauma,
Mm.
because I had to have my cheekbone reset and have an operation, my medical records just show that I went under general anaesthetic, had an operation, thing was all done and dusted. And I remember coming back to training after that. I think I was maybe like 26 at the time, coming back to training, and I was luckily because I'd had the operation, I wasn't allowed to do any contact for 6 weeks.
Were
That was
you
that was a godsend but I felt awful just doing any type of exercise, and only in hindsight, looking back, you can see this like cumulative build up of the number of head traumas I had during my career that yeah were getting worse, and it was taking longer for me to get over them until I got a very innocuous challenge in training, nothing, no big impact at all in 2013, but
so,
that's when I had a seizure in it, yeah, and it all ended.
so previous to 2013, when you have these knocks, were you ever scared on the football field of getting injured?
I remember once going through, like, as I was getting toward, and the whole concussion and brain injury things was very much like it wasn't taken very seriously at the start of my career, but coming towards the end of my career, thankfully, we were starting to understand it a little bit better. There was the lawsuit going on with the NFL, so it was like a really sort of quite big hot topic. And I remember once being it was away at Plymouth, and I was doing the warm up, and it's difficult to your classic symptoms are sort of feeling sick, maybe headaches, bit of dizziness, that type of thing. Um, and you'd be doing some drills, and you'd be asking yourself the question like, does my head is it throbbing a little bit, or do I have a bit of a headache? I'm not sure. Like it just you're trying to ask yourself, and you're sort of like hyper focused on like how do I feel in my head, which is quite difficult to ascertain. And but I remember, yeah, I remember going into this one game feeling a bit like I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I'm right. Um, but I didn't say anything, and then sort of, I don't know if luckily I broke my foot in that game, so I had to go off anyway. So it's a bit of a self-protection mechanism. But certainly, um, after I had my last one, initially I wanted to get back to playing. I remember literally being sat in the hospital and asking the physio, "Do you reckon I'll be able to play next week?" Um, but as a few days went past, and I was an absolute wreck and a mess, and I was not like anything I'd been like before. And when you start to realize this is different to how it's been before, like I've done this 10 times, like I know that this isn't how it normally is. This isn't looking good. Like, why do I not feel, why do I feel worse rather than getting any better? And I remember at that point being scared. The thing I was most scared about, I was scared that I wouldn't be strong enough to say I'm not right, and that I would my own not being able to speak out would have led me to just like going back onto the pitch. Um, but
Is there traditionally with a very tough sport like that, is there a bit of a subconscious stigma that you don't want to be seen as shirking it, or this is
uh,
your job? Or I know that seems
yeah,
silly, but
yeah, no. There will be probably. It was more. I can only speak of my own. I'm very conscious to not. I don't want to speak ill of anyone else or what or the game or anything, because I can only speak of what
yeah,
I was experiencing and feeling like at the time. And my perception of like failure and my perception of like giving up, seeing giving up as like a bad thing. I didn't want to put my hand up and say, look, I'm done, because I felt like that was giving up. And also like what's on the other side of that? Like if this is now my career, I've been doing it for however many years, like what do I do if I don't do this? Like I didn't have that plan at that point, so there was consequences to me, my wife. We'd only just got married like the month before that brain injury. My career, like there was consequences outside of just rugby that played into like what's going on in my head and the way that I perceived, the way I perceived failure or giving up, but actually, or quitting basically was that's the word that I would see quitting as a negative thing, but actually quitting. Sometimes one of the lessons I've learned is like if something's not right and you're going down this way, it's not right, quitting that route and taking this route, which feels better or is right, like that's a great reason to quit. It's a great decision, and rather than black and white, quitting's bad and sticking at it's good. Sticking at stuff is really good for lots and lots and lots of things, but there's one thing it's taught me is there's times when something's not right, like quit or use a different word if you want to, but changing that direction might be not just the best thing you do, it's the thing that's a necessity. I was lucky in the end that I had it took a number of months, but eventually had an MRI scan which showed a scar on my brain from the bleed that I'd had. That just the neurologist, the specialist, said, that's it. You can't be doing. If you do, the most sort of the biggest thing that they said that sort of hit home is, if you have another like you can see the cumulative buildup of your brain injuries, like it's getting worse and your recovery is taking longer. Like the next one could be fatal. Not
So
like
can we?
definite, but that sort of goes because the thing that was at the time, it would still be the case now. I could have ignored it was just advice. I could have ignored. There's nothing in the game that says that I wouldn't be allowed to, but they explain that if they have a professional boxer come in and have a scan and have any sort of signs on their scan like I'd had, then they take the boxing federation, whatever, they take their license away, so they're actually not allowed to box again. Obviously, it's a different sport.
Can you just take us through the final incident? You said it was quite an innocuous
Yeah.
bit of training, but what happened on the day?
So I've lost like 2 weeks of memory that never came back. So at some point before that day, I'd bought a new van that I was going to convert into a camper van. But when I saw this van, I didn't even recognize it. But apparently, I came in that day all excited about this camper van. We were apparently just playing touch in warming up, and two of us on the same team went to catch the same ball, and the other player just his shoulder, much taller than me, his shoulder just glanced me or hit me on the side there, and everyone said that it was initially like it was funny, just two of you like banging into each other, but when I hit the deck, I started having a fit. Then everything got serious. Lucky my mate Shawsey remembered his first aid and put me in the recovery position, made sure I didn't swallow my tongue, and then got the physio comes rushing over and takes me to hospital. The first thing I remember is being in hospital in the waiting room, looking down at my feet, and I've got my rugby boots on, and I was like, got my and then like looking and got my kit on. I was like, why am I sat in hospital with my kit on? I looked over to my right, and the physio was there, and I was like, huh. I've experienced this, but although I'm confused, I know what it's like to be in hospital in all of your rugby kit, feeling confused. I know I've been knocked out, so I turned to the physio and said, "Have I been knocked out?" And he was like, "Yes." And I was like, "Oh, he sounds a bit grumpy." And then I was like, "Ah, this has happened before." said, have I asked you that a number of times? And he was like, yes, just shut up. Because basically I'm just like constantly asking him if I've been knocked out. Um,
Retrograde amnesia.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
So,
I'm luckily I don't remember anything because yeah, I'm pretty glad I don't remember having a seizure. I don't think that'd be particularly nice
but you
to,
didn't even go into hospital via an ambulance. You were driven in.
no, yeah. I thought, I think so. Yeah, I think so. I don't think I had to.
And
I don't know.
you were scanned at the hospital, and then how long did it take for them to do all the tests and you get the results?
No, so I had a CT scan, which doesn't really show an awful lot. So I was told that I had a bit of bruising on the brain, and yeah, went home relatively quickly. Um, Previously, when I've had some bad ones, I've been kept in overnight to be monitored, but they didn't. They said as long as you've got someone at home that can monitor you for the next 24, 48 hours, because that's when like bleeds can come out, then you can go home. Um, so I remember my wife had to work, so I stayed at my sister's house. And the thing, one of the things that like stood out like the next day that made me really start to wonder quite early doors. Interestingly, like I knew that this wasn't right, but like I didn't. It still took a number of weeks and months before I sort of came to any level of acceptance. Um,
So what was happening? So the incident happens. You know that you've had another knock. What are you experiencing physically and psychologically in the ensuing weeks and months?
well, this is what I was going to say about the following day. I'm at my sister's. We walked to the shop to get something to eat, and I'm like a bit peckish, so um, I'm stood. I'm a bit of a zombie walking around, right? And I'm like really sensitive to light. I've headaches, fatigue. Like I'd have to, if I just went for a walk, I'd then come home and have to just sleep for the rest of the afternoon, whatever. Um, and cognitive, like decision making, was very difficult. So um, I was stood in front of a section of yogurts, and I couldn't decide which type of yogurt and which flavor I wanted, to the point where it was just an emotional overload where I just started crying my eyes out, stood looking at these yogurts. And in my head, I'm also at the same time going like, what is going on? Like I knew it wasn't normal to be like crying in a shop because you can't choose what yogurt to have. So like there was a narrative of like, what's going on? At the same time as just not being able to process just these simple decisions. So yes, emotionally, it's difficult. Depression is a very common symptom of like brain injuries and concussions, and a lot of just because the brain's been affected, almost everything is difficult. So processing light, noise, fatigue levels, the nervous system is like just completely shot. So you're just constantly tired, you're sleeping a lot, and the whole process is very challenging mentally. It's quite a depressive time because you're like, what's going on? How am I going to get better? No one can actually answer that. What if they say yes, you're going to get better? You say, how long is it going to take for me to get better? All those unknowns make for a very difficult yeah, period to overcome. Plus, you're just a zombie is the best way to describe your sort of state, I think.
When did you get a breakthrough or a bit more of a definitive diagnosis so you could find a pathway to recovery?
Um, so it was when I wasn't being able to actually, I couldn't tolerate, as I gradually started to feel a bit better, I couldn't tolerate exercise. And a few months had gone by where I eventually got referred to then this neuro specialist that had me booked for an MRI scan. And I got that and the results like just before Christmas, and I'd had the injury in August, so August, September, October, November, December. So it was like 5 months. Um, and that's when they said, you know, here's the scar on your brain. This is the effect of all your other injuries. Like, you need to stop. Um, and that's when there was like a huge sigh of relief, like for me. She was the specialist was actually very, she was very nice because she was very, she understood that it was my career and that was a big, she was like almost apologetic in giving the information. Um, but I was scared at that, but like I said, I was scared. I wanted someone to make that decision for me. And I was very grateful and felt, yeah, a lot of relief. And actually at that point, then I could start to, okay, at least now mentally, I'm not trying.
Sorry, guys. As advanced as technology is, we just had a little glitch there. Maybe, I don't know, the internet's got a concussion, not sure. Um, Sorry, David, we were just talking about the empathy and the compassion that your neurology doctor
Yeah.
was showing towards you and saying the relief that you felt when someone had made the decision for you. Was that the relief? Was that because if she hadn't of, as silly as it is, you're thinking, God, I don't even know if I've got the capacity to make the decision to say yay or nay to continue playing?
Yeah, because we didn't have any, there was no sort of definitive answers. So it was like, um, I'd felt for the last 4 or 5 months, I just felt like stuck. I felt trapped and I couldn't see a way out, which was, probably partly my, I couldn't think particularly well, like rationally, etc. Um, but yeah, I couldn't see a way out of the situation that I was in. I couldn't see it changing, and I was just, yeah, was worried that eventually I'd just go back on the field and yeah, knew I wasn't in the right place. Um, that's what I was
So,
scared of.
so you finish up with football. So you've got a couple of pretty big things. You've obviously got your recovery, but we all have to put food on the table. How did that all look to you?
Yeah, so you know um, the CEO at the club, Simon Beetham, was very good to me. He'd known me since I was like 16, and he'd coached me for a long time before he sort of took a more of an upstairs role. And I just signed a 2 year contract, so we were like halfway through that first year. Um, so he said that he would pay the remaining of the my contract for the rest of that first year,
Yep.
um, and then but then so I had until I think until like May, so I had sort of like 5 months ahead of me where the club were going to carry on paying me, which was really great. It just took a little bit of pressure off, and it was actually a really yeah allowed to just focus on recovery, but also gave me like a bit of headspace to be able to, okay, now I know we're not going that way, we're going on this new way, and this new way could be like, there's lots of different avenues, and actually, like, what do you want to do? It could be like, and so I started exploring that, which, gave a bit of new sort of life in me and energy. I started to actually get a bit more excited of like, yeah, what is life going to look like now? And I'd by that point, I was starting to be able to like get back to some level of normality. Like my exercise tolerance wasn't there, but my day to day, like I by 6 months into my recovery, I wasn't. It wasn't like I had to go and have a nap in the afternoon because I'd hoover downstairs whilst my wife was at work for 10 minutes, and then I'd be knackered and I'd have to go to bed. Like that's the sort of level of yeah of what I was able to manage, and was very grateful for being able to like just do normal things like just stay awake for the daylight hours. Which sounds like ridiculous now, but that's what was sort of grateful for, and it felt like okay, we'd gone through phases where we didn't know whether I'd be able to like have a normal job because I couldn't function. I couldn't function for a 9 to 5. Um, and yeah, and I actually weighed up or had time to weigh up everything that I wanted to do, etc. And rather than going back into teaching or following my engineering sort of degree, I felt I spent so much time in sport. I didn't want that that experience to go to waste, and I wanted to give something back. So I retrained as a strength and conditioning coach. I'd always loved that side of training, and yeah, retrained in that, um, and started working with a friend of mine that was training Paralympic athletes. So I actually had a really interesting first few years of my career as a strength and conditioning coach, where you're working with all sorts of different athletes with all sorts of different impairments, where you've done your training with the textbook that shows people with all of their arms and all of their legs and whatever else is going on, and then all of a sudden you've got an athlete that's, runs on blades, like they don't have both legs, or they're a swimmer and they've got one arm and one leg, or there's all these different things, and it's like, so what do you do with that person in the gym? Like, how do you train that? How are we going to have to adjust things? And when you've got to adjust things from the textbook, you've actually got to understand the textbook to a different level. That was my experience. So I felt like that was a really great learning ground for my understanding of how the human body works. Interested for training purposes. Interestingly, at that point, the effect that breathing has on concussions and the nervous system, but then also breathing for athletic performance, wasn't in any of the education, or any of my was not in my mind or my thoughts or my understanding at all. That took a few more years to actually get to where I am now, which is, yes, as an S&C coach, I don't do the traditional stuff. I do what I feel is the underpinning work, the foundational work, which is how breathing influences all aspects of our physical and mental performance and recovery. And it's a foundational thing that other stuff can be built upon. Plus, it can be used. Some of the conditioning things that we do, say with breath holding with athletes, yeah, is like the breathing can be like the foundational work, but then also it can be the thing that's like the cherry on the top of this is going to be harder than anything you've ever done before, because I'm going to make you do your hard sprint session, but I'm going to get you to hold your breath whilst you're doing your usual hardest thing. And it's like, whoa, how's that going to work? Well, let's just try, and I'll show you. But yeah, I love pushing boundaries and changing perceptions, and also having, which breathing can do, but also having the tools to be able to give someone the ability to regulate their system so that they can recover better from the challenges that we're going to give them, and also approach any challenges we're going to give them in training in a more regulated state, which helps them control not just the physical or the physiological responses they're going to experience, but also the mental and psychological. With my own training endeavors, I've got into like ultra running, like using those ultra marathon challenges to play with that, to experience that, and to play that out in my own sort of body and mind. That, wow, I couldn't run 2K when I started doing this, like, and I've just run over 200K. Like, how's that happened? Like, what's the process been for that, and what do I, in that process of overcoming the physical challenges in like a running ultra marathon, how do I apply that to the real challenges in life? That's where the real value in those types of endeavors come to me.
This is a pretty important topic that we're discussing, certainly where my life has intersected differently. Where did your path cross with Patrick McEwen, the Oxygen Advantage founder?
Yeah, so we were looking at, me and my wife were looking at, the number of head injuries I've had, like early onset of dementia and that type of thing, is a real thing to potentially happen in the future. So like looking after my brain health is obviously important for everyone, but like there's a real emphasis of that for us. And we, particularly when I was going through those early phases of recovery, it's like, okay, what can we do? And we looked a lot of like, my wife is big on like gut health, so we looked a lot of stuff around that and my diet. And then when you're looking at gut health, you come across the gut brain axis and that relationship between the gut and the actual brain. And then that just eventually led us in onto I'm finding some research that was from like 1968 about brain injuries affecting breathing. And I remember being like, am I any good at breathing? I was like, I don't know. I was always fit. I was always the fittest guy in the rugby team. I was like, I think I'm all right at breathing. But then it was interesting. I was like, huh, but how would I? Because working as an S&C coach, we wouldn't guess whether someone's good at X, Y, or Z. We'd test them and we'd assess them. We'd do an assessment. And I was like, huh, how would I assess my breathing? And I was just like, I don't even know how I would assess breathing in these different dimensions. A friend, Richie Norton, a friend, he was running. He was an ex-rugby player himself and had gone into like yoga and done a lot of breathwork stuff. And I went to one of his workshops, and we did. It was more of like a hyperventilation practice. But I was intrigued about breathing, and I said to him, "Mate, where I want to know more about the breathing bit. Like I enjoyed the yoga bit, but I want to know more about the breathing bit." And he recommended reading the Oxygen Vantage book. Said it's a game changer. So I read the book and was absolutely blown away and fascinated by it, and sort of like all this stuff about breathing that I had no idea about. And I was running the friend of mine that we were coaching the Paralympic athletes together. We had quite a good podcast together. This would have been back in, must have been pre-COVID, like maybe 2019 or something. And the podcast had grown to the point where we had quite good numbers and stuff. So we'd quite regularly like read a book and reach out to the author and get them on the show. So I reached out to Patrick, said, "Oh, we come on the podcast?" And yeah, we had a great chat. And yeah, the rest is history. I did the instructor training. Interestingly, at that point, I did the instructor training first, just for my own knowledge and understanding. I didn't, like many S&C coaches and within the sporting world, I wasn't really thinking it could make much of a difference to the athletes I was working with, but I'll do it for me. Then I saw the effects it was having on me, and I was like, started to look at how the athletes were breathing. I was like, oh, there's some improvements we can make here. So I started to integrate into some of the stuff I was doing with athletes, and then gradually it's turned into it's the only thing that I do with athletes, and there's not many people doing it in the sort of the world of sport the particular world of sport that I'm in here in the UK. So it feels like I need to focus on that and don't worry so much about the other stuff.
It's pretty surprising though, isn't it, considering what it can do and how scientifically proven it is?
Yeah, and there is a lot going on, but in elite sport, there's not that much. You're starting to see little bits come out now, but there's, and rightly so, there's not many people that want to publicize that they're doing X, Y, and Z, because it just lets the opposition know, and they're going to find someone to do the same thing. Do you know what I mean? So at the moment, it's a little bit behind closed doors. There's little bits coming out. Different people, different coaches are talking about stuff. Yeah, I talk about the things I can talk about, but then there's certain things where it's like, you go into a team or an international thing, and it's like, the organization doesn't want you to be posting about it on your social media because it's, and rightly so, it's for them, and they want to keep it to them, if you like. But it's coming out. Light is being shed upon it. I've got a book with Bloomsbury coming out beginning of next year, which I literally just I've put out everything in there that I've been doing with elite and international athletes. That I think people are going to I'm excited to see when people start to integrate some of these simple things into their everyday lives and their training, how much it can transform their physical and mental abilities.
Where can people find out about your book?
So it's due to be up on Amazon, I think, soon. Depends when you're putting this out. but the publisher Bloomsbury is in charge of all of that. I've handed in my full thing. I've done my amends. Like my job, I'm told, is over now, and they've got to do all of their side of things. But if people, I will obviously, as soon as I've got stuff to announce about it, I'll put it up on my social media and in my newsletter.
What's your Instagram tag that we can find?
Instagram is, well, I've just recently updated it. The breath running coach is my Instagram tag, and my website is probreathwork.com. There's two free courses on there. One, Foundations of Breathing, which is completely free, and then I've also got another free course which is for like stress and anxiety management. Those two courses are free. There's the app. If you create a free account on the app, you can access those. So Pro Breathwork app, you can access those two courses. And then there's I've got a load of programs and courses for like people looking to improve their training as well.
So do you work with people outside of sports in sort of the functional breathing space?
I do a little bit of work sometimes with like corporate clients where we're using like breathing to help like focus, concentration, managing stress. But most of my work now in terms of like coaching and consulting is with either teams or individual sports people. But that's not to say it couldn't be. Just that's where my area of focus is now. Yeah.
You just completed a 200-meter ultra marathon. What portion of that were you able to do just nasal breathing?
200 kilometer was one I'd done previously. The latest one I just done was not as far, 100 kilometers, but it was 6,500 meters of elevation in the Snowdonia Mountains. So it's a part of the UTMB World Series, Ultra Trail Snowdonia, and that's the only one in that series that I've done. But other people have done other UTMB events say that is one of the most difficult, particularly because of the type of training. The elevation is pretty insane. How much I did nasal breathing? Almost all of it. Not as to make it harder as a challenge, but because you need to be able to regulate your nervous system. On the steepest and most difficult parts of some of the climbs, then I will switch through some ratios with my breathing, and one of those would be using the mouth. But I'm a big advocate of like mouth breathe well. When most people, mouth breathing is a compensation, whereas if you earn the right to mouth breathe, when you open the larger hole in the face rather than the two little ones, you can still control the rate of your breathing, still breathe with a diaphragm because you've got time, because you're controlling the rate, so you've got a depth of breath, which helps you ventilate efficiently in terms of oxygen you can extract from each breath and keep the nervous system in a better regulated state. And then once you reach your climb and then you're coming down the other side, getting back to nasal and getting in control and calming things down so that on the decline you're recovering, because there's going to be another steep climb coming pretty quickly when you're doing 6,500 meters of elevation in 100k.
How important is the nasal breathing for strength training?
For strength training, it's there's a couple of studies been done, and this is where it's a bit of a funny one, because you like go, well, actually, what is strength training, and what am I trying to do, and what am I going to measure? So depending on what I'm going to measure will depend on whether the study says something is like helpful or not. Now, would nasal breathing in my recovery periods, if I can manage it, potentially help me with then the next set? Yeah, maybe. When I'm actually lifting, the nasal versus mouth is going to be, it's not really the right question. It's whether you're utilizing your diaphragm and what's the relationship between your ribcage and your pelvis. So the mechanical aspect of breathing is going to play into, and that can be done well whether you use your nose or your mouth.
So you don't think using the nose is easier to engage the diaphragm in?
Depends on the person.
Okay.
Not always, but yes, but no. Like what I get, people oversimplify things, and then we lose the context. So, making a black and white statement that when you breathe through your nose, you activate your diaphragm more. Well, how many people are you? I've worked with hundreds of people, thousands of people, where like I get hands on and I'm seeing how these people breathe, and I can tell you that just because someone breathes through their nose doesn't mean they activate their diaphragm. The most dysfunctional part of people's breathing is in their mechanics. That's what when 96% of people were, or 91% of people identified, or with the athletic population identified as dysfunctional breathing in like the Japanese study from 2023. That was in the mechanical aspect of their breathing. The if you go and see people, general public that know nothing about breathing, in a sort of seated position, so they're sat down on the bus or on the train, almost all of them, if not actually all of them, but maybe there might be one or two that aren't, the significant number of them will have their mouth closed and they're breathing through their nose at rest. It's very normal. But if you look at their mechanics, they're pumping their upper chest. The upper chest, vertical dominant breathers. They're all breathing through the nose, but they're not breathing diaphragmatically. So yeah, that was me getting on my high horse a little bit, because too often people go, "Oh, breathing through the nose provides more resistance." And so more resistance, the diaphragm then can have something to pull against. That resistance slows things down, so you're stacking things in your favor. But dependent on that resistance might be too much, or if I've just got the habits of breathing into here, if my ability to engage my secondary breathing muscles are stronger, and neurologically I'm like wired to having practiced that a lot, and my diaphragm's all tight and jacked up, and my rib cage is tight and stuck, just because I stop breathing through my mouth during exercise and breathe through my nose, my rib cage doesn't automatically become freer and start moving easier. My diaphragm just go, "Oh, this is beautiful," because it might be all jacked up. So I've got to do some work on the diaphragm. I've got to actually activate it first before strengthen it, and I've got to free up that rib cage. And then the position of the rib cage with the pelvis makes a massive difference on how the diaphragm functions. So I've got to get that relationship between the rib cage and the pelvis to start to stack things in my favor. So simplified, yes, the nose is going to help me have a chance of activating the diaphragm better, but it's not as simple as just shut your mouth and everything's fine.
What when you're training the athletes, how much are you working on mindset as well with this type of breathing, as far as calming themselves?
As much as I can, every opportunity. Whenever I'm trying to coach something, I'm always like trying to add layers into what we're doing. So if I've got a chance to mobilize the rib cage and teach them about like their breath control, and to challenge them mentally to help them like stay relaxed when they feel a little bit more. So like if I can do a number of things all at once, then I can give them one exercise to do, and I'm ticking a number of boxes rather than giving them 4 different exercises. To doing the mental, psychological side of it is one where breathing really gives us an opportunity to get better at that, as well as like challenge it, depending on the different protocols that we use. Like the breath holding is going to challenge that, your breath control of how you respond. There's huge opportunity with that's a real area of fascination for me, for sure. Yeah.
Are you ever required on game day, or is all the stuff that you do with the athletes before?
Yeah, no, yeah, I'm not. They may have things that they're going to do, but ideally, if they need me in order to be able to do it, I haven't done a good enough job in empowering them with the tools. Because none of the stuff we do is with the breathing exercises. They're not difficult to do, so yeah, they should be able to implement them on their
You
own.
don't see a role for yourself on the sidelines during day if a player's lost his head or something, coaching them back into calm.
Maybe, I don't know. We're not. That's not been something that's you know, because also one of the other things that I do when I'm working with teams is it's about helping some of the coaches, physiotherapists, S&C, for them to understand that process, so that, like, you know, they're the people that are. My role of the team is much more consulting wise, so they're there day in day out with them. They have a better relationship with the athletes. They see them all the time. They can be getting those regular messages to them. And like I say, ultimately, like the athlete being able to, you know and understand that process and how to utilize it. So when they if they do, you know, if they lose the head, they recognize that they lose their head, and they know how to use their breathing to bring them back online.
Um, have you or do you face resistance from traditional trainers at clubs?
Yeah, no, obviously not normally with the people that you end up working with, because they're paying you to do it, so they obviously don't. But yeah, no, sometimes, particularly, it's the difference between working one on one with athletes, that they're like, right, I want to do it, so let's do it. Compared to a team where you might have a bigger group, and some of them will want to do it, some of them might be a bit skeptical, and some of them are like, why am I working on breathing? And, you know, and I'm very sympathetic, because I was totally skeptical myself when I came across it. You know, before I'd got really into it, I was like skeptical. You know, is it? As I even mentioned when you said earlier, I said I didn't think I would use it with any athletes. Like, I might use it to help me with, like, regulating my nervous system for my brain health and blah blah blah. But I didn't think it was going to be actually make a difference for athletic performance. So I understand why people are skeptical, and I think that the education on it and the understanding of the physiology of it just needs to catch up a little bit. But it's far easier now than it was 5 years ago. You know, 5 years ago, you were constantly trying to convince people that they should try it. Whereas now, and I think some of it is a little bit of, like, if you do a good job, like, reputation helps, or, you know, someone knows a player or an athlete that you've worked with before, and it's like, okay, I'm interested as well in what you've done with so and so. So yeah, just you just got to play the long game, I think, with something when it's a little bit new. And I think with breathing, there's this whole notion of, like, really, breathing so simple, and a bit like admitting we should work on it would be admitting that we missed it, but we've all missed it, for too long.
Do you think there's still a bit of a misnomer when you say breath work to people? They still think it's a little bit woo woo and candles and incense and all that sort of stuff when you just
Yeah, again, depending on their experience of it, like I say, probably like 5 years ago, it were very much, if you said breath work, everyone would just automatically, if they didn't, either they didn't know anything what that meant, or they assumed it meant a hyperventilation practice. So if you weren't teaching hyperventilation, it was a bit like, oh, this isn't what I was expecting. Whereas now, the sort of, you know, the whole functional breathing, and just that there are things that are, yeah, that more to them. I guess the way I approach it from my background as an S&C coach, so I take a very sort of, like, S&C approach to the different components of breathing when we're looking at it, and try to just to coach it as I would coach any movement pattern, and strengthen it like I'd strengthen any movement pattern, and challenge it like I'd challenge any modality, so that it feels, yeah, much more integrated as part of a program, rather than this, like, oh, this totally new different thing that we're going to start doing, because you're already breathing anyway, so it's not that weird, and making it not seem weird is, yeah, it's part of that piece of that puzzle, I think, to get people on board.
The book's going to come out. Where else are you heading? What are some new projects on the horizon for you in this field?
Well, the books took over the last sort of 18 months probably or so. Um, so yeah, there's that's been my main area of focus. I'm developing a few like um, training programs for my app, but the other thing that I want to try and actually put a lot of more time and effort into is my YouTube channel to just really get some high quality, longer form content out there, which rather than sort of the short little things on social media tend to be like little snippets and tidbits of things that trying to capture someone's attention, but then you haven't really got that long to actually explain something in detail. So some longer form content is something that I want to try to do with my I guess the free content that goes out there.
How much of your time is taken up as a master instructor for Oxygen Advantage?
Well, for example, this year we've got one more training coming up in October here in the UK. So I'll have run three trainings. So I normally run like 3 or 4 trainings a year. Each of those are 3 days of teaching. Um, but then I run a monthly group mentoring session for all of the coaches, so all the coaching instructors that have certified with me. So I have that monthly commitment with them and that group, and yeah, that's a real special group of coaches that all have got a really wide range of experiences in different like health and well-being, as well as exercise, but more health and well-being more so than sport and exercise. Where there's a lot of there's a lot of knowledge and experience in that group where they share and support each other, as well as the ongoing sort of education and CPD work that I try to do with them as well. And chance to stay connected and support people, not just teach them the certification in the 3 days, but support them through the certification process, which is like 3 case studies in the exam. And then importantly for me, like supporting them, like once someone's become certified, like actually how to coach and how to become the best coach or instructor that you can be, and that you want to be. So, and that's an ongoing process. So that's one of the things I love about the sort of mentoring side of the role as a master instructor, working with coaches. Yeah.
How often do you sit back and go, well, this wasn't the path I expected, but I'm really happy and really enjoying it?
Um, I mean, I'm very grateful for where we've come to, and I wouldn't be at this point with everything that had happened. So I'm really grateful for my brain injury, because without my brain injury, I wouldn't have changed course, and I wouldn't have looked at breathing as something as important as it was for me at that point for brain health. So um, yeah, I don't necessarily. I think about how how grateful I am for where we've got to, and looking back, the path to get here was very strange and odd in the direction of it. And what I do now, when I retired from rugby, what I do now didn't exist. There was no such thing as breath training as a coach. So when I just use that to look forward with excitement of going like, well, I don't know what, in another 10, 12, 15 years time, like where will this path go? Like, don't know, because I don't know what happened. I don't know what had happened before. So that fills me with a lot of excitement for the future, because I find that exciting. And then, yeah, just grateful for where we've ended up right now.
Where where does your brain injury sit for you? Like, are you affected at all by it? Is anything changed, or are you in such a good place that it's something that's taken place, but it's like a broken bone in that it's healed to a certain extent? Does it?
Yeah, Yeah, that's a good question. I have still some. When you look at my like latest brain scan, there are um, there are signs of the injury, um, and that's like the connections between different parts of the brain. Um, but I really feel like the way if I'd have not like restored my breathing and not had breathing as a tool to regulate my nervous system, and I was still, I wouldn't be. The things I struggled with were I wasn't able to manage stress. So if everything was fine, I'd be fine. But the smallest of stresses would tip me over the edge. So I had no resilience because my nervous system was still all upregulated, all jacked up. So I put that down. I don't have any like data or a study to quote. It's just my own experience of it. But yeah, if I
Anecdotal's good. I like anecdotal. I think that's
yeah,
fantastic.
but if I didn't have yeah, if I well, I know when before I had breathe, but before I had regulated my breathing and my nervous system, like I know what that was like. Um, and yeah, my sort of typical concussion symptoms of like headaches and sensitive to light and fatigue, all of those things would like had subsided.
Mm.
But my ability to manage stress, whatever, however that stress came in, was very low. And it wasn't until we addressed breathing that then that would change. Memory is the only thing that's, and that would be memory would be much worse during times of stress. That would be the one thing. But yeah, when I so long as I look after myself and I keep myself regulated and I build that resilience, I'm able to do more and more and more and more. And I feel right now the best I've ever done.
David Jackson, you are a really interesting person. I am sorry that you had to have the head injury, but you've taken a very interesting path, and I think it's fantastic what you're doing. And I really appreciate you joining us on the Bare Facts today.
Mate, my pleasure.